One question the commissioner won't be asked next week is about Dan Snyder, the former owner of the Commanders. The Commanders finally have hired their head coach, first one post Ron Rivera, first coach of the Josh Harris era, and it surprised a lot of people. When Ben Johnson removed his name from consideration the other day as the plane was in the air to come interview him in Detroit, when he removed his name because the sense had percolated throughout the NFL grapevine that Adam Peters, the new GM of the Commanders, was hiring Ben Johnson, it created the impression they were back to square one. And instead of expanding the search and looking elsewhere, which they could have done, they just hired one of the other guys that they had talked to. They hired Dan Quinn. Commanders fans aren't thrilled. Guys' defense just gave up 48 points in the playoffs to the Packers. It's not the kind of sexy hire that's going to inspire the fan base. But if he comes in and wins, they'll forget how it felt the day he was hired.
Well, I think the whole thing is interesting. First of all, let's start with Ben Johnson. And, you know, Mike, I was in Detroit for the playoffs. There were people in their organization who really thought that Ben Johnson was getting a job. They thought that this was the end of Ben Johnson. I'm not saying it was not Dan Campbell. I'm just saying that there were those in Detroit who thought that Ben Johnson was getting a job. And then, you know, as the month went on, I kept hearing Washington. Yeah, that's done. A general manager in the NFL said, oh, he's definitely going to Washington. So that was the word on the grapevine. And I'm not saying true, false, whatever, because I really don't know. I don't cover this the way I used to cover it. I used to live and breathe. Now, when it's Tuesday and Wednesday in the off season, or after the regular season, I mostly try to catch up on my sleep and be normal. So, but I will just say this. What was odd about this is that you really never heard very much at all about the real possibility of Dan Quinn getting this job. And you only heard about Ben Johnson. And look, when you've been doing this for a while, you understand, you start to hear things. Very rarely do you have a situation where a guy, and I'm not saying Dan Quinn came out of nowhere, he interviewed with them. So, but 15 people interviewed with the Chargers, 7 before Jim Harbaugh, 7 after Jim Harbaugh. But again, the traction for him was not very much. And you also have to realize this, Mike. The owner of the football team, who paid $6 billion for this team, got on an airplane the morning after, the first morning of the new week, in which they could go and actually talk to Ben Johnson. The owner of the team, not just the general manager and a minion or two, but the owner of the team got on a plane. Everybody thought that, well, this is the crowning. This is it. This is the official whatever. So all of that happened, and then when they land, they're told Ben Johnson is going to stay here. So all I'm saying is that I believe that the Washington Commanders were very surprised and perhaps taken aback by that event. And then they went to plan B for them, which obviously they didn't want to be embroiled in awful headlines for a long time. So they went to plan B. Now, I'm not even saying this is wrong for Ben Johnson. I don't know that it's wrong. The one thing that he would have gotten to do is he would have gotten either the best if they traded up, the number one guy on their board. They still might get the number one quarterback on their board with the second pick in the draft. Ben Johnson would have gotten either the best or second best quarterback in a rich crop of college quarterbacks to mold like a piece of modeling clay, to mold in his image, to do something with that he did with a damaged Jared Goff when Goff got to the Lions. And you see now, I don't know what number Goff is, but he's gone from being about at one point, the 24th best quarterback in football to maybe the 9th. Or I don't know, you pick a number, but it's a lot better than it was. And that is a lot of the work of Ben Johnson. So he is giving up that opportunity. However, the reason why I don't join the chorus of people saying, man, Ben Johnson, unless you think that once you have an opportunity, you got to strike while the iron's hot. Okay? Ben Johnson's a very young man. That's why I don't believe in this. Plus, he will have next year, barring a bunch of injuries, a top 5 offense in football, maybe a top 1. And so the opportunities are still going to be there for him. Maybe there was something about this job he didn't like. Maybe Dan Campbell got in, bit both kneecaps, and said, you're not going anywhere. I don't know. But whatever happened, Ben Johnson's career is not over. It's not an awful decision by any stretch. I just think that he's going to have a chance in the future somewhere else, and maybe he didn't think this was the best chance.
And look, it's ultimately a very personal decision, and it's not an easy decision to walk away from a significant enhancement of your title and your compensation. A huge night and day difference. How do you justify that with your family? You better sit down and have a good conversation about why you are saying, I'm not interested in getting on my ship that has come in. A better ship will come in for me next year. And There's no guarantee of that. Byron Leftwich was on the list of head coaching candidates last year, and I literally don't know where he is right now. I don't know what happened to him. He fell off the face of the earth. Bobby Slowick could be the hot guy next year. Jared Goff comes down to earth. C.J. Stroud continues to improve and improve. Maybe Bobby Slowick is the guy everybody wants. And you got Bill Belichick covering everything. You got Mike Vrabel out there. There's no guarantee you're going to get your pick of jobs next year. And you may decide next year to kick the can again. At some point, the window's going to close for good. And only he knows why he didn't do it. And, Peter, that's why I'm not comfortable with the reporting that his asking price spooked a few teams without knowing what his asking price is, because we know the teams collude when it comes to coach pay, especially entry level. They don't want to pay for coaches. There's no union. No one's going to sue them for collusion or antitrust violations. They don't pay entry-level coaches. So what does it take to spook owners who don't want to pay more than a set range for any first-year head coach? And is it fair to be spooked by that? Or are they just being cheap and collusive and willing to violate the federal antitrust laws by basically preparing to give any owner that would blow the curve the Jimmy Haslam cold shoulder treatment that he got 2 years ago after he blew the curve on Deshaun Watson? So I'm not comfortable saying or seeing anybody else say his asking price spooked teams. Maybe it shouldn't have. Maybe the teams are in the wrong. Maybe they missed an opportunity to have a great coach, because you're going to pay a quarterback 30, 40, 50 million a year. You're not going to pay a coach 15, 16, 20 million a year who is a great coach and is going to mean a lot more to the success of your team than one player. So I've been trying to find out exactly what happened. Nobody's talking about it. The Commanders have their spin that they put on it. I don't think they did a great job of managing the PR expectations. They didn't do a good job of getting the word out that Ben Johnson wasn't the presumptive hire, because we all believed it. And they never pushed back on it until after he stayed in Detroit. And then they're putting out this idea, well, they didn't want to have a first-time GM and a first-time head coach. Well, I didn't hear that 4 weeks ago when they were saying it's going to be Adam Peters and Ben Johnson. And nobody was saying Dan Quinn was a serious candidate for that job. I thought Eric Bieniemy was a more serious candidate for that job than Dan Quinn. I thought they wanted an offensive coach. We were led to believe all that. So there's an important lesson to be learned here as it relates to the PR and what PR truly means for a sports organization. It isn't just sit around and wait for the fire alarm to go off. You have to have an affirmative strategy for crafting the narrative that meshes with expectations, creates expectations, and avoids situations, Peter, where the fan base says, well, looks like they didn't get the guy they want, and they settled for plan B.
You know, I thought about Ben Johnson a lot after this happened, and I remember I've only had one conversation with him in my life. And he's just a calm, quiet teacher. That's what he is. He's like a Frank Reich to me. But I only bring that up because I thought to myself, the reason that I have respect for Ben Johnson is that you never hear him blowing his own horn. You never hear him saying how great he is. He's just seemingly a very low ego guy who I can tell you, there are teams in this league that on Monday, there's at least one team in this league where the head coach has said to his quality control guy on offense, I know you got a lot to do today, but I want you to make sure you watch every offensive snap of the Lions. This is a good coach, Mike. And that's how much Ben Johnson is widely respected, which is why I don't think this is a dumb thing. Look, 2 years ago, 22nd best offense in football. The last 2 years, 4 and 3. By the end of this year, I think the game was slightly mismanaged in the second half and not just on fourth down. I think the play calling was a little suspect. But again, you can always say that about the team that loses. But again, just remember, although you are going to get the quarterback that you want, okay, you also thought that this franchise, the Washington franchise, loved getting Eric Bieniemy and thought that getting Eric Bieniemy was really going to jumpstart their offense and their quarterback. The fact is, they were 24th in the league in total offense. I'm not saying that in any way as an indictment of Eric Bieniemy. In no way do I think that indicts Eric Bieniemy. What I think that says is that the quarterback has a middling ceiling. You know, it's here and not here, okay? And, you know, the rest of the offensive talent, and particularly, as in Carolina, I don't know how you make a definitive judgment on Bryce Young after watching 600 snaps of him running for his life this year. So, and I think the same thing with the Washington quarterbacks this year. The offensive line was awful. So again, you can do two things, Mike. You have two choices. You can stay in a place that has a great offense, that everybody in the place is so fired up about next year, and they're positive they're going to take the next step. Whether they do or not, that's one thing. But then you're going to a place and you have to maybe not invent it from scratch. You got some very good players. You got Terry McLaurin, who I think is a top 10, 12 receiver in the NFL. But you don't have enough of those guys, particularly on the offensive line. So I don't think this is an indictable thing for Ben Johnson in any way, shape, or form. And I think he will be in good shape. And you're absolutely right, Mike. If we had said, a month ago, or now, I guess you'd have to be honest, that 20 days ago, that the coaching cycle was going to finish without Bill Belichick and Mike Vrabel getting jobs, we would have said that's phony. That's a ridiculous thing. But it happened. And so coaching searches, there are never any locks. And right now, to me, you can say today, at this moment, that the 2025 coaching search process is going to have at the top Bill Belichick, Mike Vrabel, Bobby Slowick, Ben Johnson. And Mike, there's going to be one or two or three surprises that people are going to say, oh my God, somebody's got to hire this guy. This great coach from college is leaving college because of NIL and transfer and everything. So somebody's got to hire him. So you're right, there are no guarantees. But if I were Ben Johnson, I'd be pretty happy to be coaching that Lions offense another year.
Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.